Right now, you're sitting inside a box made of concrete, glass, and steel that keeps out the rain, the cold, and anything that wants to eat you. And it's so normal you never even think about it. But for 95% of human existence, the concept of home didn't exist at all. The first human who built a wall between themselves and the world didn't just change architecture. They changed the entire nature of human relationships. Let's go back roughly 300,000 years. Early humans didn't build anything. They moved with the seasons, slept wherever the day ended, and used whatever natural shelter they could find. Slept wherever the day ended. An overhang of rock, a thicket of trees, the lee side of a hill blocking the wind. Home wasn't a place. Home was wherever you happened to stop. Caves were the first real shelter. But caves weren't owned, they were borrowed. A group might use the same cave for generations, then abandon it. When a predator moved in, or when the herds they followed moved on. Archaeologists have found hearths and caves in South Africa dating back 170,000 years. Proof that humans were managing fire indoors long before they ever built a wall. Around 400,000 years ago, something changed. Humans started building rather than just finding. The oldest known human-made structure is at Terra Ameda, in France, a simple oval hut made of branches, roughly 20 feet across, with a hearth at the center. It wasn't permanent. It was rebuilt season after season. But it was the first time a human decided where the walls would go, instead of just accepting what nature provided. For tens of thousands of years after that, shelter stayed temporary. Tents made of animal hide stretched over bone or wood frames. Pit houses dug halfway into the ground. For insulation against brutal winters, these structures moved with the people who built them. Because the people themselves never stopped moving. You couldn't own land you didn't stay on. Then, around 12,000 years ago, everything changed at once. Humans in the Fertile Crescent began planting wheat and barley, instead of just gathering them, and a planted field can't move with you. For the first time in the history of the species, staying in one place became more valuable than moving to follow food. Agriculture didn't just change what humans ate, it nailed humans to the ground. And once you're nailed to the ground, you need something that lasts longer than a tent. The first permanent settlements appear almost immediately after farming does. Çatalhöyük in modern-day Turkey dates back over 9,000 years. A dense cluster of mud brick homes packed so tightly together that residents entered through holes in the roof, walking across rooftops like streets. There were no doors between neighbors. There was barely a concept of neighbor yet, because there was barely a concept of separation. Once people stayed in one place, they started accumulating things. Tools, grain stores, animals. And things that can be accumulated can also be stolen. The wall stopped being just a barrier against weather. It became a barrier against other people. Archaeologists can trace the moment property ownership becomes a serious idea by tracking when walls between individual homes get thicker, and when walls between individual homes get thicker, and when locks, actual mechanical locks, start appearing in the archaeological record, some of the earliest from ancient Egypt, over 4,000 years ago. As settlements grew into towns and then cities, shelter stopped being something each family solved alone. Cities meant shared problems: water, waste, fire risk, defense. Water, fire risk, waste, and shared problems require shared infrastructure. Ancient Mesopotamian cities built some of the first urban water and drainage systems. Roman cities went further with aqueducts, feeding public baths and private homes alike, and apartment buildings called insulae, stacking dozens of families on top of each other in a single structure, sometimes 6 stories tall, built entirely from brick and concrete. Materials themselves became a kind of technology race. Mud brick gave way to fired brick, which lasted through rain instead of dissolving in it. Wood gave way to stone for anyone who could afford permanence. And in ancient Rome, a breakthrough: concrete mixed with volcanic ash, strong enough that some Roman concrete structures are still standing 2,000 years later, while modern concrete sidewalks crack within decades. For most of history after that, how you lived was almost entirely about how much weight a wall could hold above it. Stone and wood could only stack so high before collapsing under their own weight. That's why for thousands of years, cities grew outward instead of upward. A 4 or 5-story building was close to the practical limit almost anywhere on Earth. Then, in the late 1800s, 2 inventions broke that limit at almost the same time. Steel framing meant a building's weight could be carried by an internal skeleton, instead of by its outer walls. Suddenly, height wasn't limited by how much stone could stack on itself. And the elevator meant humans didn't have to climb. The height that steel now made possible The Home Insurance Building in Chicago, completed in 1885, is usually credited as the first skyscraper, just 10 stories, which sounds almost quaint now. But it broke a ceiling that had held for the entire span of human civilization. After that, height stopped being a meaningful limit at all. Within 100 years, humans were stacking entire cities vertically, hundreds of families living in a single tower, on land that could once have housed only a handful of farmhouses. The amount of usable shelter humanity could create per square foot of land multiplied by orders of magnitude, almost overnight on a historical timescale. And now, the home has become something almost unrecognizable. Climate control means your house no longer cares what season it is outside. A door that locks with your fingerprint instead of a metal key. Walls that can talk back to you. Dim the lights, or order groceries while you sleep. The average modern home contains more engineered comfort than entire ancient cities could provide their wealthiest residents. And you call it ordinary. For 300,000 years, humans had no home at all, just whatever shelter the land happened to offer that night. They learned to build temporary structures that moved when they moved. Then farming nailed them to the ground, and shelter became permanent for the first time. Permanence created ownership, ownership created walls between neighbors, new materials let walls last centuries instead of seasons. Steel and elevators broke the height limit that had held for the entire span of civilization. And today, you live inside a structure more sophisticated than anything a king could have commanded 1,000 years ago. And you call it ordinary. Every wall around you right now exists because 12,000 years ago, someone decided that staying still was worth more than moving on. But they were right about that, and we're still living inside their decision.